What is going on, chat? Welcome back to another video of me talking about some random stuff. I'm gonna do this off the rip, no script, because I've tried writing a script for like 2 videos already, and it takes forever, and it just feels like homework half the time. So I'm just gonna start doing it like this and just not thinking. Um, which is probably not the best way to do this stuff, but I don't fucking care. Anyways, I wanted to talk today about um a problem that I was dealing with before, in which I didn't really know who I was as a person. I don't know if I've talked about this in my previous video, um, but I just recently realized that I didn't really know who I was, and that kind of affected the way I responded to people um not like inviting me to stuff or that type of thing, not interacting with me. But I'll start from the beginning. Um back in back in middle school when I was a loner kid and I talked to nobody, I I was just known as a quiet kid, like no one knew who I was. So I essentially had like I basically had no identity or no good identity, at least. And what I mean by that is like how people viewed me. Um, and I didn't really know who I was myself either. Like other people put labels on me and identified me as the quiet kid or whatever. Um, but I didn't know who I was either. But let's see, coming up to high school. Oh, when I started making art and that type of stuff, I realized that I would get attention from it and people would like my stuff. And then people would start calling me the photography guy, right? And so then my identity shifted from this nobody to the photography guy, And obviously that felt good to me at the time because I was known for having a good skill, right? Now good skill being subjective there. But yeah. Anyways, um this kind of made me develop a really bad relationship with my art. This was, by the way, like sophomore high school, so like 4 3 years ago, something like that. But I developed a really bad relationship with my art because my identity relied on the validation of people. My identity relied on the validation of people of my art, if that makes sense. So if people liked my stuff, they would reinforce the idea that I was this photography guy in my mind. So my whole identity was that. I think I just reset everything I just said again. But anyways, this made me develop a bad habit of just making art just to get validation for it. When at the time I thought I was doing it just for fun, but it seemed like I really wasn't doing that. But anyways, this is where it kind of led to my art burnout, like last summer, where I just kind of lost motivation to do any type of art. And I'm guessing part of it was because that was the fact that I was just putting so much emphasis on the attention I would get from my stuff. And it became more of like me being a show rather than me making art just to make art type beat. And I hold the idea that art is supposed to just be for oneself. I feel like it's a totally selfish thing where I think art is only meant for yourself. Like the process and everything, that is the most important thing. And the product, whether it be good or bad, is just a side effect of it. That's my opinion of it, but I didn't think of that at the time. I just thought I have to make something good to reinforce my idea in my mind that I am that person, right? Um, so when I got the burnout, I felt really, really lost because, well, who was I now? I'm not that person anymore. So who am I? Am I just this annoying kid that no one wants to talk to? Am I the guy who goes out? Am I the skateboarder? Like, I don't know who I was, right? And this carried over into my college, like first term college year, where um I f- I still was, I still felt like I was nobody. Or no, wait, I was still holding on to the idea that I was this photography guy. And I remember first time I would try to release stuff. I would take pictures. I would try to go make projects. Mostly to like prove to my new friends that I was this cool photography guy, right? But um, then I kind of started worrying again if about like if my new friends even like me. Um, I remember sometimes my mutual friend. Well, I had this friend group, and sometimes my roommate would go and hang out with them, and I would just be by myself. And sometimes I thought like maybe they're just leaving me out because they don't like talking to me, right? And sometimes I would cry at that thought in my bed. But I remember reading a quote like that first term that said, what was the quote again? It was, "Know your worth, lest others set it for you." And I like when I first heard it, I didn't think of much. I didn't think about it as much. But when I was in those moments of like, are my friends leaving me behind because they don't like me? I started thinking about my own worth. Like, aside from the photography, what am I worth? Who really am I? And this is when I developed the first idea of if people don't like who I am, then they are not the right people for me. So I started kind of relaxing more on the idea that people are leaving me out of stuff, mostly because they don't like who I am, so I wouldn't like being with them, right? So that really quelled my fear of like being left out. Um, but then beginning of this year, January of 2026, someone's walking by. January of 2026, this year, I had another revelation type thing where why does he have to sit right there? This chair is right outside this door and he's sitting on them and he can hear me, bro. This is so annoying. I'm gonna talk quietly. Uh, so January of this year, I I watched this anime called Kokoro Connect, and you gotta hear me out on this, okay? Because if look, just hear me out, just hear me out. At the beginning, or the main thing about this anime is that like the first half of the season is like there's this event where people are switching bodies and stuff, and one of the characters brought up like a really really interesting point where it's like if everyone's switching bodies, if they're switching their whole appearance and everything, what makes them them? Like what if you were in that position of if you switched with like your friend, how like what would define you? What would people look at um if there was like another person in the room and then you swap with your friend and that other person tries to find out who you are, how would they know who you are? You know? So and those things, the things that the other person would pick up on, that's what makes you you. So then I started thinking about what are those aspects that would make me me? What are the aspects that would let other people identify me, right? So then I started thinking about that too, bro. He doesn't have headphones on, bro. He can hear everything, bro. Um, so then I started thinking like, what are those aspects of myself that people could identify? So I kind of started tearing myself apart, not in like a bad way, but like trying to like break myself down and see who I really am. And I feel like ever since I've done that, I've had a really strong concept of, a really strong idea of who I am. I feel like, I mean, I'm not gonna name them because I can't name them off the top of my head, but I feel like I know who I am now. If hypothetically I were to be someone else, I feel like I would know who I am. Yeah, but ever since I found that out, um, I feel like whenever I don't get along with someone, like if I meet someone new or even just like a friend, I'm trying to get to know them or whatever, if they just don't mess with me, if they just don't like me, I don't feel as mad. Not mad is the wrong word. I don't feel as like sad that they don't accept me because I know who I am. I know how much I'm worth, and I'm not gonna let other people define my worth. If someone tries to tell me that, I am lower than what I think I am, I mean, I might take the hit and think about it, be sad about it, but I feel like I would still, at the end of the day, know that I am this person, I am worth this much, and it won't affect me. Now, obviously, there's a caveat to this where I might think of myself higher, and that's a whole nother thing. In terms of like humility, um, I feel like it feels weird saying that I have humility because I feel like that also said because I feel like if you have humility, if you say you have humility, I feel like that kind of says you're like not don't have humility. If that makes sense, I don't fucking know, but I feel like I do have a good amount of humility, especially because I put myself down a lot. I used to a lot for like the past like 5 years, bro. So I feel like I have a really strong sense of humility just because I myself don't really think that high up. I always think there's someone better than me. But anyways, yeah, that's kind of my talk for the day. Just identity and stuff. So yeah, good chat.